Huh? I used to know these systems like the back of my hand. Only it's someone else's hands now. My old hands. Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. It's been over a year since Power of the Doctor when we last did one of these. I'm your host McEdam, but the Doctor Who Marathon never stopped. Every month we've had a continuing on from the story. We're all up to date. In Doctor Who magazine, we have had the 14 comic book event, Liberation of the Daleks, written by Alan Barnes and is drawn by Lee Sullivan. This continues on from the main series. This was produced essentially by Russell T Davies, who's taken back from the role of showrunner after Chris Chibnall left in 2022. And essentially one thing he wanted to do was try and unify at least the comic book, the Doctor Who magazines. And one thing that he basically let Doctor Who magazine do is that essentially in the magazines they have like a small comic strip. And what he's done, he's given them permission to basically tell current Doctor Who. And what I mean by that is, literally this story starts off right after the end of the Power of the Doctor, in which the 13th Doctor has just recently regenerated into a face similar to the 10th Doctor, as David Tennant is back, now playing the 14th incarnation of the Time Lord. Technically 15th if you count John Hurt, 16th if you count Joe Martin, 100 and something if you count the rest of the Timeless Children event. But yeah, so this is kind of groundbreaking, because not only have we, this is a 14 issue. I've been collecting these Doctor Who magazines since I think they started in October last year. So for me personally, Doctor Who has never stopped. And the 15th Doctor stories are still concurrent. So that's just this is absolutely wild. Sorry for any echoes or anything. I can't remember if I mentioned this, but I've recently had the house refurbished. We've got new flooring and stuff, so we've got empty space. So we've got a lot of echo. Oh, hello, Tom Baker's booming voice always reminds me of Echo. So yeah, basically Russell T Davies allowed them permission to have these stories concurrent. In fact, I believe in one of the issues, Russell T Davies basically stated this story, despite being 14 issues long, each chapter lasted around 6 pages. Remember, this is part of a magazine, it's not actually a full-on comic. So 6 pages of each. I can't remember doing the maths on this. I don't know the maths on that. 6 times 14, that's how many pages you got. Which is probably, I think, is the biggest Doctor Who magazine comic story that they've ever done. Which is quite mad. So, yeah, we got a lot to dive in here. We're not going to really talk about the implications of bringing David Tennant back, with the exception of, how this story portrays the 14th Doctor. And I want to save that for the next video, which will presumably be a lot less smaller in content. Yeah, it's really mad, the Doctor Who was allowed to do this. I do find it funny, however, that the first of the TV specials, which officially brings back David Tennant, is a story that's an adaptation of one of the earliest Doctor Who magazine stories. So Russell T Davies is both basically saying, these are definitely canon. We are saying that these stories run concurrent with the TV series, whilst also going, oh, by the way, they're like a separate thing, and we can adaptate these stories for later events. I mean, when I'm recording this, it's the day before the Star Beast airs, so I don't know if that's going to be a thing. Isn't it mad that we're getting Beat the Meat for the 60th anniversary? That's just... Sorry, I'm rambling here. So yeah, Liberation of the Daleks. As you can tell, it is a Dalek story. I will be going into spoilers. There's a lot of detail that happens in this story. And right off the bat, like you have Daleks invading a 1966 football event, something to do with England versus Germany, winning the World Cup or something. I have no history in football. I have no interest there, so I don't know like the big deal of that. It was very weird. But let's actually just talk about the first issue. One thing I really do like in the first issue, I'll show you now, is that we do see the 14th Doctor inside the 13th Doctor's TARDIS. The rumour is, at the moment, is that basically they got rid of the old set before filming these new episodes, so this could be the only real official appearance we'll see of this incarnation inside the actual TARDIS, if that makes again. Also, the first line, "Born Again Again," is a nice little nod to the Children in Need special, Born Again, which was actually the first appearance of David Tennant's Doctor, not counting just after regenerated in Barton of the Ways. So that's really cool. But right off the bat, I feel like the story has a few issues. Well, I say a few issues. It has one issue in this story which really holds up to the rest of the story, and I think it's pretty obvious where this issue is coming from. And that is, in this story, the 14th Doctor, I was going to say 15th Doctor, the 14th Doctor is so bland. Essentially, I can see what's happened. Basically, Alan Barnes was able to write the most current incarnation of the Doctor, but because we haven't actually seen anything from these stories, and we can't actually, have the Doctor go in and finding out why he's got his 10th face back, his 11th face back, if we're counting John Hurt. Because the story officially cannot do that, the story basically just has the Doctor basically Googling everything. The concept of core Doctors, which a lot of fans describe a extended media work, like comics and novels and all that, which doesn't really participate to any particular Doctor in terms of how they're written. Maybe the writer isn't a fan of that incarnation or is unfamiliar, like in this particular case, which is kind of strange in this case because, it's David Tennant. He has already been the Doctor for about 4 years before. So really the story doesn't actually have him dealing with the fact of that. The Doctor basically, at the start of the story, I think it's in the first panel, where the Doctor's just like, "These are my older hands," the speech I did at the start. That's all you're getting. That is all you get of the story arc of why the Doctor, like, it doesn't even. Okay, we're going to get into further. Basically, following on from the first issue, in which at the end of it, the Daleks appear and actually invade England in 1966, and then the Doctor is taken to basically the Daleks fire at him, which is actually the cliffhanger for issue 2, which is issue. Oh, I forgot to mention, these magazines consist of the issues 584 to 597. The story basically has the Doctor, the cliffhanger for part 2, has the Doctor essentially gets shot down by a bunch of Daleks. There's no way out, there's no escape, there's no bargaining chip. He is just exterminated on the spot. However, nothing happens. The Dalek fire seems to go through them, and he quickly comes up with the theory that this is all a fake, this is all a simulation, which makes a lot of sense, and actually that is what happens. Essentially, this is set in a cytoplasm universe in which, in basically a holiday resort where a bunch of people can go to this place and basically safely live out these horrible events revolving around Daleks, essentially making them like pop culture figures. So all of these events aren't real, with the exception of the Dalek Emperor, which is actually the red Dalek Emperor, which we previously seen in Journey's End and the Stolen Earth. Is it the Stolen Earth? Stolen Earth and Journey's End, yeah. It turns out like these people have kidnapped that Dalek and implanted its brain into this system and made it live out basically its fantasy, where people then can go into this fantasy, basically get unharmed and live out a Dalek adventure. And the Doctor quickly seduces this. He comes up with this theory, he comes up with these ideas. And at no point in the story does the Doctor go, these things that look like real aren't, and it's a simulation of a Dalek event. And the fact that he does not connect that to the fact that he's back as the 10th Doctor. There is no... I mean, of course, in the story there is actually no connection, but the fact that he doesn't even think, he doesn't even question, it's like, hold on. If this is all fake, and I've suddenly come back into my tent, maybe this is a fake, maybe who's ever behind that is behind this, trying to live out some sort of 10th Doctor adventure. But never does that ever appear in the story. As a cover of the with the City of Death. Oh yeah, I should really mention, I believe this is the first time, I could be wrong, but I believe the second issue is the first time the cover is actually about the comic book story which was released in it. These issues had a lot of criticisms in terms of the covers, because a lot of them had the 10th Doctor. This one particularly was going to be a issue revolving around, I believe it was Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi's 10 years, but they changed it because they realised it was the Sarah Jane Adventures celebration, and they picked this image, which doesn't even have most of the cast members. They just have Elizabeth Sladen kind of crouched out in the corner, K9's head is cropped, and just David Tennant taking over the centre stage. Again, we'll talk about David Tennant's role in the series in another video. There's another one, David Tennant with Billy Piper there. Yasmin Finney as Rose. Look again. Well, Christopher Eccleston on that. That was pretty cool. But yeah, it's kind of annoying. So later on in the story, the Doctor discovers this holiday resort and is absolutely horrified by it. And we get introduced to this female character who we see earlier on in issue 2, I believe, for a cameo. It was very weird because the way the panels are placed out, I thought it was a reference to something which I missed. But no, it was actually a setup in which a character basically steals the World Cup, the Football World Cup thing. Something to do, this is apparently some sort of a historical event where the cup was stolen, or was missing for a while, which was a thing that happened in history. I don't know nothing about football. But essentially the Doctor pushes her to keep her safe in the TARDIS. The fact that he would just let a random stranger in, and he doesn't even follow in, he just closes the door. Clearly they're setting up the fact, they want this person in this TARDIS. I felt that bit was really kind of forced. I don't understand from the panel's perspective anyway, why the Doctor didn't just follow her in the TARDIS, where they would probably be more safer there. But that's more of a nitpick than anything. And essentially what the Doctor discovers then is that we see this character earlier on, and then later on we're getting reintroduced to this character, and we she is somebody who basically owns a military force for this resort. It has something to do with the fact, that this holiday resort is actually teamed up with the military, and she basically runs the military side of this resort. And she basically explains that the psychoplasm has a copy of people that go there, which obviously unintentional, but it does kind of remind me of the whole writer's strike. One of the things was that the background actors will have their face scanned and they will be used in other films without their permission or get paid for their work. That has nothing really to do with the story, just that's how my mind went. But essentially, because this girl, the copy of this woman, which is just like a normal character, a normal person living in the fictional 1966, was inside the TARDIS, and later on gets tricked by the Emperor Dalek. The psychoplasm basically contains the psychoplasm, allowing her and the Emperor Dalek to exist inside the real world for a short period of time. And what happens later then in the story is that we get a bunch of scenes, about 6 or 7 scenes, which basically play out the same, but it gets pretty repetitive, where the Doctor is in a situation where the Daleks have the higher ground. They have all the resources, and they're basically ready to conquer, and they have all the hostages. And the Doctor essentially has to talk himself out of it, and his plan essentially gets more Daleks involved to try and trick one another. It does get kind of repetitive after a while. The results are like the first one. The other, it's either that or it's a case of just wait long enough and the problem will solve itself, where the psychoplasm basically doesn't hold up long, and the Dalek Emperor basically melts, turning back into psychoplasm. Also, just had a note, in the way they trick this girl into letting them into the TARDIS is they essentially summon a hologram of the 14th Doctor inside the TARDIS and asks the girl to open the doors, let me in. Why the hell have the Daleks why don't they just do that all the bloody time? It's so bizarre. But anyway, the story has a lot of great twists and turns. One bit I should have mentioned earlier on is that when at the point of the story where we don't know about it being a fictional world, one of the cliffhangers, I believe it's part 3, has the Daleks just blow up the Earth, which is a great cliffhanger. But it doesn't really result much to anything because this was all fake to begin with, and we learn that quite earlier on for the Doctor. And the Doctor never really, he gets a line where it's like, if this was real, you would regret that. I don't believe it's real, but if it was real, if you did just destroy the Earth, you will regret it. And then that's about it, really. So the fictional version of Georgita, I believe her name is. Georgita, she comes up with this really bizarre plan, which I don't understand. She essentially goes back to her universe, her plasmaverse, and she basically tells this information to an even earlier rendition of the Emperor Dalek, another Emperor Dalek, in a version of Skaro, which is meant to look like the TV action comics, the very first Doctor Who comics, which were basically all about Daleks on Skaro, which we haven't touched on the Doctor Marathon. I don't think so. But it was a cool little nod. And from this point on, really the story is just a bunch of nods to a bunch of Dalek stories. We do see, at one point, one of the Doctor's plans is essentially get other Daleks involved, because the Emperor Dalek, the one that Georgita has teamed up with, basically learns that if they use his psychoplasm, because he's become more self-aware now, he knows now he's in a fictional world, that if he uses this psychoplasm to create a world of mathematicians, that can calculate how to make a portal to the real world. I mean, it's not a fictional world in the sense of like it's an actual fictional universe, but rather it's fiction, the mind being brought to life by cytoplasm. And so basically his plan is that he's going to come and invade the real world. We get a really cool hypnotizing Dalek at one point. It's really, okay, basically the cytoplasm version of Georgita, she gets hypnotized by this hypnotized Dalek, and her brain is still connected to her original form. And so her original form can then hypnotize everyone else, and the Daleks take over the dome. I don't really understand it, but it makes some cool interactions. Also here, we get a really funny scene where basically we see the rest of the dome. And we get a really funny scene where we see two aliens that take the form of gorillas. I think they're aliens. I believe at one point they do mention that this place was a zoo at one point that experimented on animals, turning them into anthropomorphic beings that are very similar to humans. We see them two getting married with a Dalek marrying them. We also get a really fun nod to Nicholas Briggs, who voices the Daleks in the revived series and in Big Finish audio dramas, in which basically he is like the speaker to the dome, telling like a kid at one point, it's like, you've lost, for the girl who lost her mum, please report to our office and we can reunite you with your mother. Before quickly getting exterminated by the Georgita character. I probably got the name wrong, I do apologise. But yeah, we get a lot of like nods here and there, but nothing really substantial. Nothing really like to delve your teeth in. It's just a bunch of references. But we get a really fun one where the Doctor teams up a bunch of other Daleks in the cytoplasm that are trapped in the cytoplasm. We get the first Dalek Emperor from Power of the Daleks, Evil of the Daleks, which is the second Doctor story which he's tackled on the marathon. We see a Paradigm Dalek, which was introduced in the 11th Doctor story, Victory of the Daleks. We also see a stained glass Dalek from the 6th Doctor's audio drama, Order of the Daleks, which we haven't tackled. We have not talked about that on the marathon, but it's on my bucket list. As well as some other Daleks that we've never seen before. Like a Night Dalek. There's a scene in this story where King Arthur and a bunch of people who he thinks are the Round Table, but actually people at the resort, go and ride dragons to fight Remembrance, Imperial Daleks from Remembrance of the Daleks, which is really cool. But like they don't really have that much. Like they're literally just there. The Doctor talks to them. They don't have anything significant to. I mean, the main story is about them being the cytoplasm in the verse. But it's so strange to have so many variations of these Daleks, and only really two get characters. The red Dalek from Journey's End and the big domed Dalek from the Action TV comics. And I've got to say as well, in terms of ending the story, we're going to jump to the ending. The Doctor essentially destroys the moon planet holding up the portal, and the Dalek is like, right, okay, you are going to take me onto the TARDIS and you are going to let me escape, keeping me alive in the cytoplasm verse, keeping the cytoplasm contained when we go into the TARDIS. And the Doctor's like, yeah, I agree, only to realise that the big dome head can't fit through the TARDIS doors. That is how the bad guys are defeated. That was a very dumb way. So anyway, that was Liberation of the Daleks. Also, it is strange to note that the Daleks had previously appeared in Power of the Doctor, and then they appeared in this. Even though it's not really them, they do appear. So from the Doctor's point of view, they've gone from having a Dalek story to having a Dalek story. And we'll talk about it again in another story. But that's just really weird. So anyway, that's the liberation of the Daleks. Overall, I'm going to admit I didn't really enjoy this story. Not that it was bad, there was a lot of great entertaining moments. The Earth being destroyed, Daleks invaded in 1966. I believe it was Wembley. Seeing the Dalek Dome and having all of these really quirky moments with Nicholas Briggs and Marion Gorillas, and seeing a lot of these really quirky moments. Lee Sullivan's art. I'm not a particularly fan of this style of art, which is a lot more like what you think comic books look like. But for what it's worth, he brings a lot of these quirky ideas to life, especially like the big action scenes. It really does feel like an epic adventure, which it is, because it's a 14 issue story adventure. But overall, the story really has nothing going for it narratively wise. The story isn't really about anything. It's the 14th Doctor here is incredibly bland, with the story being afraid to tell what the character is or what this incarnation, how it differs, because it's too afraid to upset what will be the official way this character will be interpreted in future stories. The story relies on basically being as safe as possible, which is strange because this is the story where they blow up the Earth at one point. So every moment which feels great, which feels grounded, which feels like this is the epic story which it's trying to tell, always gets undermined in some way, shape or form. And there's some really stupid moments. For example, the Daleks turn into paint, dissolving, and one of the Emperor Daleks just can't go in through the door of the TARDIS. The story does end on a cliffhanger, sort of, where the Doctor goes back into the TARDIS. That's the wrong issue. Basically, the story ends on a cliffhanger, in which there's the psychoplasm of the cup, the World Cup, and essentially it melts into the TARDIS console, and the Doctor's just like, oh no, I hope that doesn't have any ramifications. It's melted on the fast return switch, a reference to The Edge of Destruction, the third Doctor Who story ever to be produced. That's really cool. And essentially it's teased that the Doctor, if he used the fast return switch in this scenario, would travel back to Skaro, because I think it has something to do with the fact that the TARDIS landed in the psychoplasm Skaro, which now doesn't exist, so it will travel to the real Skaro, which ties into the next story in our marathon. I feel like I wasted my time on this, to be perfectly honest with you. Not that it's bad by any stretch, I did enjoy it, but that was about it. I could easily forget this by tomorrow. So anyway, that's Liberation of the Daleks. Sorry to be a bit of a bummer. But join me next time when Doctor Who celebrates one of its traditions, which is essentially helping children in need, where the Doctor is hurled back to the genesis of one of his greatest foes, as we see a variation of one of the Doctor Who's most iconic villains. So join me next time for the Children in Need event, Destination Skaro. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm glad to be back. Welcome back. So, happy 60th anniversary, by the way. Happy 60 years of Doctor Who. Ta-da.